My husband dumped me for a younger coworker and told me good luck finding better. I found it better in a month. I was married to Greg for 10 years and I thought we were solid right up until the night he sat me down at the dining table and told me he was leaving. He did not look nervous. He looked relieved. He said he had been seeing a woman from his office named Amber, that she was younger and more exciting, and that he had outgrown me. I asked how long it had been going on, and he said, long enough to know she gets me in a way you never did. Don't make this ugly. I sat there in shock. He kept packing while he talked. He told me, look, I gave you 10 good years. Most women would be grateful for that. But let's be honest, you let yourself go and I need more than this. Then he stopped at the door with a box under his arm and smiled at me and said, good luck out there. I won't lie to you. It's rough for women your age. Amber was not any better. A week later, she messaged me, not to apologize, but to say, sorry, but you can't help who you fall for. Maybe if you'd taken better care of him at home, he wouldn't have come looking. The worst part was how many people around us bought his version of it. His mother, Lorna, called me 2 days after he moved out and said, a real woman fights for her marriage. You must have driven him to this. Friends we had shared for years went quiet and started showing up to birthdays with Greg and Amber instead. He blew up my life and still walked away looking like the winner. But here is what Greg got wrong about me. I was not going to sit in a dark room grieving a man who told me to be grateful for the years he gave me. The marriage had been dead a long time, and once he was gone, I felt lighter than I had in years. I started going out again. I got back in shape for myself. I took a promotion I had been too scared to chase while I was busy managing Greg's moods. About a month after he left, I met someone. His name is Etienne. He is kind and steady, and it was easy in a way things with Greg never once were. And that is where Greg lost his mind. The same man who traded me in without blinking could not stomach that I had moved on. He called me furious. He said, are you serious? A month? 10 years of marriage and you replace me in a month? That is ice cold. You clearly never loved me. I reminded him that he was the one who left me for a woman he had been seeing behind my back, and he said, it's not the same thing. I struggled with my choice for months. You just jumped to the next guy like our marriage meant nothing. He believed he was allowed to trade me in while I mourned him forever. Lorna jumped in too, telling anyone who would listen that I must have been cheating myself because no decent woman moves on that fast. It stung, because people who did not know better believed it. Greg even lectured me to my face. He ran into me at a store with Amber on his arm and said, watching you throw yourself at some random guy really shows me who you always were. I dodged a bullet. I walked off without giving them the fight they wanted. Then things with Amber started coming apart. The exciting younger girlfriend was a lot less fun once she was dating a middle-aged man with a mortgage. She wanted to go out constantly and spend money he did not have, and she had zero interest in the quiet home life Greg suddenly wanted. He started calling me, first pretending he wanted closure, then letting it slip how stressed he was. I did not take the bait. Then Amber left him for a man with more money and fewer problems, and Greg was alone in the life he had torn ours apart to build. That is when he showed up at my door and told me he had made a huge mistake, that he had been confused, that we had something real. He said, come on, 10 years. You can't just throw all of that away. I told him he already threw it away. I told him his leaving was the best thing that ever happened to me. I just had not been brave enough to be the one to do it. I blocked his number the next morning, and that only meant he found other ways to reach me. What I did not expect was how fast he would put his mother to work. Lorna had always believed Greg could do no wrong, and now she had a mission. It was Anahi who told me how far it had gone. She came over on a Tuesday with her phone already in her hand, and a look like she had been holding something in all day. She sat down at my dining table and said, she called me too. She told me you were sleeping with Etienne while you were still married, and that I should stop enabling you. I just stared at her. Lorna had called my best friend and tried to flip her. I wanted to drive to that woman's house and scream until my voice gave out, but Anahi grabbed my arm and said, don't blow up. That's what she wants. Let's figure out who else she's talked to. I hated that she was right, so we made a list at my counter that night. Every friend who had stopped texting, every cousin on Greg's side who had gone silent. It was longer than I wanted to admit. We started calling the next day, and most people were awkward about it. A lot of, oh, I've just been busy. But the one that gutted me was a teacher I used to work with. She had gone quiet for 3 weeks, and when I finally got her on the phone, she said, I didn't believe it, but she was so convincing. She said Greg had proof. I asked what proof. She said Lorna told her Greg found texts on my old phone, messages between me and Etienne from while Greg and I were still married. My stomach went tight, not because it was true, but because it was so completely invented. I did not meet Etienne until 5 weeks after Greg moved out. There were no texts. There was no overlap. She made it up out of air and said it with enough confidence that a woman who had known me for years pulled away from me. That night, I borrowed Anahi's phone and called Greg directly. He picked up on the second ring since he did not recognize the number, and when he heard my voice, he went quiet. I said, your mother is telling people you found texts on my phone. You know that's a lie. Tell her to stop. There was a pause while he decided how to play it, and then he said, maybe if you hadn't jumped into bed with someone 5 minutes after I left, people wouldn't be asking questions. I can't control what my mom says. I said, you fed her this story. And he said, I told her what it looked like. That's not lying. That sentence told me everything. He knew she was inventing it and he did not care, because the lie made him the victim and me the villain. He handed her the ammunition and let her fire it so his own hands stayed clean. Anahi watched me sit with that and then said, you need to get ahead of this. Have a dinner. Small. Just the people who matter. Let them hear the real timeline. I hated having to defend myself like I was on trial for the crime of moving on, and I said as much. And Anahi said, you're not proving yourself. You're taking the microphone away from her. That landed. If I stayed quiet, her version won by default. So I planned the dinner. I called Ariana first, because she had never once wavered, and she said yes before I finished asking. Then I called Gil, which was harder. He had been friends with both of us for years and had stayed carefully in the middle since the divorce. But people listened to Gil. He said, I'm not picking sides. I just want to hear what's true. I said that was all I was asking. Then I sat down with Etienne and told him everything. The calls, the invented texts, the friends drifting off, and when I finished, he said, I'll be there. I'm not hiding from anyone. 2 days before the dinner, he came over with something heavy on his face and said, Greg messaged me. Greg had tracked down his number and sent a long note dressed up as concern, telling Etienne I was emotionally unstable and had a history of attaching too fast. He read it out loud. Hey man, no hard feelings, but you should know what you're getting into. She has a pattern. She clings, and then she rewrites history mystery when it falls apart. Then he set the phone down and said, I didn't respond, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't get in my head for a second. That hurt, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. I did not blame him. If a stranger's ex came at me with a story about patterns and red flags, it would land somewhere in my brain too. What made me angry was Greg. Greg, who left. Greg, who cheated. Greg, who told me I let myself go and wished me luck like I was a charity case. He reached for the one good thing I had found and tried to poison it, not because he wanted me back, but because he could not stand that anyone else wanted me at all. I did not yell, and I did not cry. I came back with my laptop and my phone. I pulled up the email confirmation from the moving company Greg hired to collect his things, and the date sat there in black and white, 5 full weeks before Etienne and I ever crossed paths. Then I scrolled to Amber's message, the one telling me I should have taken better care of him, time-stamped a week after he was already gone. Greg was gone. Amber was gloating. I was alone in that house eating cereal standing up because I could not make myself cook for one. Etienne went through all of it slowly, checking dates, then set my phone down and said, I believe you. I believed you before this, but I'm glad you showed me. He's not over you. That's what those messages really are. The next afternoon, Anahi came by to help me get ready, and I told her about the message before she had her bag off her shoulder. Her jaw went tight. That's not a man looking for closure. That's a man making sure nobody else wants you if he can't have you. Then she pulled out her own phone. I was going to save this for the dinner, but you should see it now. It was a screenshot from a private group chat with a dozen of our mutual friends in it. Lorna had written, my son gave that woman everything, and she repaid him by parading a new man around before the ink was even dry. Pray for Greg. I read it 3 times. People I had spent holidays with. She dropped it in there like she was reporting the news. Anahi had taken it weeks earlier and had been sitting on it, waiting. I told her to bring all of them to the dinner, and she said, I've got them organized by date, every single one. Of course she did. Later, Ariana called and asked if there was anything she could do. I said, just be honest if anyone asks what you saw. She said, I remember. You couldn't eat for 3 days. That's not a woman who had a backup plan. The night before, my phone rang from a number I did not know. It was Greg. He said, I heard you're having some kind of gathering. I think I deserve to be there if people are going to be talking about me. I told him he was not invited. His voice dropped into that low register he used when he wanted me to shrink. You're making a mistake turning everyone against me. I was willing to do this quietly, but if you want a war, I can make things a lot harder for you. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but it was not fear. I went back to my grocery list, and somewhere between chopping vegetables and wiping down the table, the shaking stopped and turned into something steadier. Etienne arrived first the next evening with a bottle of wine, calm as ever. Anahi and Ariana came together. Anahi with her bag on her shoulder like she was walking into a courtroom. Gil was last, a little stiff, like he was not convinced he should have come but was too curious to stay home. I watched him watch Etienne, the way people do when they are working someone out without asking. I did not jump in to explain or sell him. We sat down and it was small talk for a while, and then Gil got where he had been circling. He turned to Etienne and said, so you met her pretty recently, huh? It was not cruel, but it was a test, and everyone at that table knew it. Etienne set his fork down and looked right at him. About 5 weeks after she and Greg split. I know how that sounds, but I didn't know she existed until she walked into a friend's get-together. There was no overlap. Gil nodded slowly, and then looked at me and said, look, I've known Greg a long time. I'm not saying I believe everything his mom's been saying, but a month is fast. People talk. But I kept my voice level and said, Gil, he left me for a woman he had been sleeping with while we were married. He told me I let myself go. He told me good luck finding anyone else. I don't owe anyone a mourning period for a man who replaced me before he packed his bags. The room went quiet. Then Anahi slid her phone across the table to him and said, read these. I watched the polite skepticism go out of his face inch by inch. He set the phone down and said, I didn't know she was doing all this. Ariana spoke up then, quiet but firm. I was there the week he moved out. She was a wreck. She wasn't seeing anyone. She could barely get through a workday. Gil rubbed the back of his neck and said, I should have asked you directly instead of just listening. Anahi raised her glass and said, to the truth, and we drank. And for about 90 seconds I thought that was the end of it. Then the knock came, hard and fast, angry before the door was even open. Greg was on my porch with his jaw clenched and his eyes red, and half a step behind him was Lorna, holding her purse against her stomach like a shield, her mouth set in that thin line she made whenever she decided she was right and everyone else was beneath her. Greg looked past me into the dining room and said, you thought you could have a little trial behind my back? I'm here to set the record straight. Before I could answer, Lorna put a hand on my arm and moved me aside in my own house and walked to the edge of the table. She looked at every person at that table, then longest at Etienne, and said, oh, so this is the jury? How nice. I sat back down in my own chair at my own table and said, you want to set the record straight? Go ahead. We're all listening. Greg stood at the head of the table like he was giving a speech at a meeting nobody invited him to. He pointed at Etienne and said, I know I made a mistake leaving, and I own that, but what nobody here knows is how cold she was during our marriage. I begged for affection for years. Amber was a mistake, sure, but she happened because I was starving at home. He delivered it with a practiced sadness, like he had rehearsed it in the car, then looked around waiting for somebody to soften. Lorna stepped up beside him and aimed herself at Gil, because she knew exactly who mattered in that room. She said, my son gave this woman a beautiful life, and the second he stumbled she was out the door and into another man's bed. And now she has you all here eating her food while she plays the victim. Then she turned and pointed at Etienne like she was identifying him in a lineup. And you should be ashamed of yourself, moving in on another man's wife. Etienne did not stand up and did not raise his voice. He just looked at her and said, she wasn't his wife anymore. He made sure of that. I saw her blink. But Greg had already turned away, because Etienne had never been a real person in his story. Only a prop that proved how heartless I was. He turned to me and his voice cracked. And this time the crack was real. He said, we had 10 years, and you act like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. I came here because I still care about you. And I will be honest about what happened in me. For one split second, I did not see the man who told me I let myself go. I saw the man who held my hand through my father's funeral and did not let go for 3 hours. It caught me sideways and I looked down at my plate. It lasted 2 seconds, but Lorna caught it and pounced. See? She knows. She knows she moved too fast. She knows she's wrong. I felt the room tilt. Gil shifted in his seat and that careful neutrality started rebuilding itself across his face. Ariana opened her mouth and Lorna talked straight over over her. You don't know their marriage. None of you do. I watched my son cry over this woman for months before Amber. Months. He tried. She didn't. She said it with such certainty that I could see it working. Greg looking broken and sincere, his mother looking like a woman defending her child, the two of them making a picture that was hard to argue with on feeling alone. I could feel the evening sliding backward through my fingers. And then Anahi spoke from the end of the table, clear and unhurried. Can I ask you something? Lorna turned like she had forgotten Anahi was in the room. Like Anahi was a background character who was not supposed to have lines. Anahi held her phone up with the screen facing out and said, "Did you write this?" Then she read it, and her voice did not shake. "My son gave that woman everything, and she repaid him by parading a new man around before the ink was even dry. Pray for Greg." She let it sit, then scrolled. "And this one, from the 9th, where you told people she was cheating the whole marriage." She scrolled again. "And this one, from the 14th, where you called her trash, who never deserved your son." The silence that followed was not the polite kind. It was the kind where everybody understands at once that there is no walking it back. Lorna's face froze mid-expression, mouth half open, hand still raised from gesturing. Greg's mouth opened and nothing came out. He looked at his mother, then at the phone, and I watched him catch up to the fact that every word had been collected, time-stamped, and put in order weeks before he knocked on my door. She found her voice eventually, and it came out thin. Nothing like the woman who had marched in 5 minutes earlier. She said, "Those messages were taken out of context. I was upset. A mother protects her son." Anahi did not lower the phone and did not offer her a way to save face. She said, "You called her a cheater in writing. You told people she was sleeping with Etienne while she was still married. That's not protecting your son. That's lying about a woman who did nothing wrong." Then Gil pushed his chair back and stood, and the scrape of it cut through the room. He looked at Lorna with an expression I had never seen on him, harder than disappointment. He said, "I believed you. I pulled away from her because of what you told me. You looked me in the eye and said you had proof." She started to say something and he cut her off. "Don't. Just don't." Greg was panicking now, his eyes moving too fast, his hands opening and closing. He turned away from his mother and swung back to me. "Okay, my mom went too far. I didn't know she was saying all that, but that doesn't change the fact that you moved on like I was disposable. You didn't even fight for us." And there it was, the thing underneath all of it. He needed me wrecked, because that was the only proof he would accept that he had mattered. I stood up slowly, because I wanted to be on my feet for it. I said, "You told me I let myself go. You told me good luck finding anyone. You left me for Amber and smiled on your way out the door, and now you're standing in my home asking why I didn't fight for you? I didn't fight for you because you told me not to." His face crumbled. "That is the only word for it." He said, "That's not what I meant, and you know it." I said, "That's exactly what you meant. You just didn't think I'd listen." Lorna grabbed his arm hard enough to bunch his sleeve and said, "Let's go. These people aren't worth it." But he pulled free. He yanked his arm back and turned on her and said, "Mom, stop. You made this worse. You told people she was cheating and you had zero evidence. Zero. You made it up because you were angry." Her face went red all at once and she said, "I did it for you." And he said, "You did it for yourself. You couldn't stand that she walked away and didn't crawl back, so you tried to destroy her. That's not helping me. That's punishing her because she moved on, and I couldn't." She had no answer. In all the years I had known her, it was the first time I ever saw her without one. Then everything Greg had walked in with drained out of him. He turned back to me and his voice came out so quiet I had to lean in. "I know I messed it all up. I know Amber was a mistake. I know I said terrible things to you. And I know you're happy now, and that's the part I can't handle." Then he looked at Etienne, not with anger, just tired. "You seem like a decent guy. She's better than how I treated her. Just don't do what I did." Etienne looked back at him and nodded once and said nothing. Gil came around the table and said, "I'm sorry. I should have come to you first." I nodded, because I did not trust my voice. Ariana put a hand on my shoulder and squeezed and said nothing. Anahi slid her phone back into her bag without a victory lap. Lorna left first. She walked out through my hallway with her purse still against her stomach and her grip gone loose, and did not look at a single person on her way. Greg followed, got halfway to the door, and stopped with one hand on the frame. He looked back at me, red and blotchy and swollen-eyed, nothing like the man who had walked out of that house months earlier telling me good luck. He said, "I meant what I said, about messing it up for whatever that's worth now." Then he was gone. I walked over and closed the door. Not a slam. I just closed it, and leaned my back against it, and let out a breath I had been holding since the night he told me he was leaving. The house was quiet, the door stayed closed, and I did not look back.